Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have enjoyed the opening power panel as much as we did. I think it's a very timely time. It's a very timely situation for us to be having this conversation. And for those of you who have addressed your questions directly to the panelists, our team will make sure that you get your answers. But before that, thank you so much to Jagdiv, Catherine, Datuk Johan, and Daniel for such a great and insightful discussion. Everyone, we are about to enter the first thematic track of the day, which is the retail track, which is powered by Ipsos. And to open the session, our keynote speaker will present some of the key observations of retail in the pandemic times and ways for retailers to stay on track in the new and unforeseen economic directions. This is also a very hot button topic, so I hope you guys enjoy it. But here is the Group Service Line Leader for Customer Experience and Channel Performance of Ipsos, Mr. Chris Dann.
Good morning, everyone. As was mentioned there, I'm Chris Dann. I head up the Customer Experience and Channel Performance service lines in Ipsos, Malaysia. I've been lucky enough to be here in Malaysia for the last 8.5 years. I've raised 2 children here as well. We very much call it home. So I've been on both sides of the fence, facing the issues that we will discuss today as a consumer in Malaysia, as well as helping various clients overcome some of these. For those of you not familiar with Ipsos, it's a global leader in market research. We're present in around 90 countries around the world and have over 18,000 employees. Locally, in Malaysia, we have around 500 employees, including some of our Asia-Pacific technology hubs. Today, we'll go through some of our observations of retail in pandemic times, explore whether we're indeed moving into new and unforeseen directions, or instead if it's more of an acceleration of existing trends that already exist. We'll look at what this means, and we'll set out ways for retailers to stay on track, which at this stage very much points towards an omni-channel offer, and just as importantly, staying close to their customers. So just briefly what we'll cover, we'll have a bit of a look at the public mood, some of the new behaviours we're observing and how digital is faring in that. From a customer experience lens, we'll learn why it's important for us to understand and adapt and can anticipate our customers. And then lastly, we'll give a few pointers on where we feel retailers need to focus to stay on track, both from a bricks and mortar perspective as well as digital. Throughout, we'll share some recently released Ipsos data from our e-commerce Unleashed study, as well as what worries Malaysia. Using these, we'll show some of the behavioural impacts we've seen online, the current sentiment of consumers, and we'll share further research into what brands should do to stay close to customers and how to grow relationships. At the moment, we feel we're really at a tipping point, right? The reality of retail today is much like a roller coaster. Shoppers and retailers alike dealing with uncertain and stressful dynamics that are frequently changing. The COVID pandemic has turned life upside down for many in different ways. Shopping is one of the everyday activities that has been disrupted by the pandemic, turning a once enjoyable, probably leisurely experience into something much less straightforward, with a mix of emotions, anticipation, and even some dread. And meanwhile, businesses have seen the importance of responding quickly and appropriately to these upside downs. Health and safety is also an entirely new focus brought on by the pandemic. We've observed various other retail shifts as well, from changes in footfall, the growth of e-commerce, the growth of direct-to-consumer. And these are not new, let's say. They're part of existing trends, but the difference really is the pace of change, which has been dialed up significantly. So while it's important to recognise the magnitude of changes we're seeing and will continue to see in the future, it's important not to be drawn into overstatement. A lot of what we see is an acceleration of existing trends. Just a bit of a look at the public mood. The virus is here to stay. Our analysis of the public mood throughout the pandemic so far shows that it's not a simple linear journey towards a return to normal. People around the world are moving through cycles of the emotional journey, local flare-ups, and from the situation here, we've had MCOs, RMCOs, CMCOs, EMCOs, and it's whether these are real or feared, they really do send people back into a heightened state of anxiety, and that behaviour changes to suit that. And just on the chart here, we have some of the latest data from our Ipsos e-commerce Unleashed study. And you can see these have the different stages of the pandemic that we go through. From the start, where in the early stages, some maybe felt we were unaffected, right through to, it becoming that new normal. But what we can see is a big increase in the anticipation phase over the last few months, meaning that the recent MCO has seen even less people being able to do what they're used to do. And that has dipped significantly since the last wave. Similarly, in our recent press release for Ipsos, What Worries Malaysia, COVID-related worries are now back to #1 spot. And again, this is highest across all of the countries that we track. So it really shows that it's not currently going away. I think as long as the virus does exist, and that emotional journey continues and remains, highly changeable, for now we need to accept that really for now, no normal is a new normal. And just as companies respond to these challenges of the crisis, customers also change the behaviour and attitudes. That usual routine activities that gave customers the initial confidence really no longer apply in this environment. We see, customers' needs right now are not the same as they were before, and they may change again in a few weeks' time. These needs and expectations have changed. Therefore, everything we know about the customer journey, what they do, how that happens, and what their needs and expectations are, have completely changed. This crisis really does, represent a moment of truth between brands, employees, and customers, the whole ecosystem. We're seeing the changing priorities, attitudes, and behaviours. While customers' needs are still there, the means of fulfilling those needs have changed, and some have become much more obvious. Health and safety is a clear example of that. The purchase decision that has also changed significantly. We're seeing a shift from more routine autopilot purchase modes to those that are now more cautious around the spending and need more clarity on these. And from a customer experience perspective, there's let's say a state of flux or even potential panic, right? Because the constant change. Brands, call centers, online channels are struggling to cope with the demand. And for some brands, these are probably already broken, right? We can see a lot on social media at the moment in Malaysia, where there's a lot of negative sentiment towards some of those changes, towards the brands that can't cope. And often digital can be that downfall. It's when that process is broken and consumers try to go back to traditional channels where we're seeing that highest impact. And I guess it's critical during these times that brands really relate back to the original promise and continue to deliver that, because if not, it can really break those strong customer relationships. We know COVID is clearly an accelerator, right? Before COVID, we used to say it was going through unprecedented times of change, but really now it does feel like we've moved to that, full roller coaster of emotions. On the left-hand side, we can see some of the key aspects, right? It's accelerating the decline that we're already seeing for several retailers. Some major chains have ceased trading both locally and globally, and we've got some local giants where we've seen some examples of that. It is forcing change, There's decisions made around curbside pickup, shift to delivery, and a change in store format and layout that we need to act on. Of course, the acceleration in digital and e-commerce, right? What we're here to talk more about today. And similarly, which coincides with that, digital payments are on the rise, right? We're seeing a significant increase for e-wallet usage, and where obviously some of the recent government initiatives have helped to grow these. If you look wider, recent Bank Negara data just shows that the volume of the online transactions. I think we're now over 20 billion between January and September of this year alone, and that surpasses the whole of last year. We're seeing some of the major e-wallet players having a tenfold increase in its user bases through 2020 so far. And then if we look at the impact at the consumer, specifically on the financial level, we're seeing some different examples here. 45% delaying or cancelling big ticket purchases, 20% plus experiencing salary reductions, and unfortunately we're also seeing job losses, albeit of a slightly lower scale. All of these have changed shopper behaviour, right? And again, when we look at more data from our e-commerce unleashed study, we can see some of the impact of that. At this point, still nearly 8 in 10 are more mindful of shopping spend. 2/3 spend more time going through and vetting online vendors and looking at the security aspect. 3/4 of us spend much more time researching products online. And the only slight decrease we see wave on wave is for a consideration to the health and safety. okay, where consumers have shown a slight relaxation over the last few months, although still over half of our consumers call this to be a key concern. People are also conflicted, and we've found that the decision to either, stay at home or actually visit stores is not straightforward. It can run in both directions. And the phases of the pandemic that I showed earlier has quite a big impact and influence on that, right? Including the culture of different groups, as well as personal goals, emotions, and that memory trigger of previous experiences. And I think that the big question for now for businesses invested in retail is really to consider the role of the stores, right? Are they now a place to buy, or are they a place to explore? I think retailers need to engineer stores in a way that it gives shoppers a reason to return. Otherwise, they'll probably suffer a permanent drop in appetite to shop in the store. And if we look at the data here on the chart, we can see that over 2/3 still state they're making fewer trips to stores, right? Though positively in Malaysia, we can see that is reducing wave on wave from pre-lockdown, around 73% to around 2/3 over the recent months. One of the things that may help that within Malaysia is our mall concepts, right? The convenience of having the stores in one place in that retail bubble may well help to get the footfall in return. The issue of the falling footfall and maintaining the value of bricks and mortar retail may have become more urgent due to the pandemic, but the ways to deal with it haven't drastically changed. Let's say physical stores in locations that have been ruthlessly planned, they must better adapt to meet the customer needs and those expectations, and more importantly, they must work with the digital presence in a seamless and very meaningful way. Now, if we just focus on digital for a while, firstly, if we look at the growth, right? I think over a period in early lockdown, our data found that many consumers were trying out first-time purchases in various categories. So around 40% of online grocery shops, half of those purchasing beauty care and cosmetics, and also for electronics, right? So we're creating that first-time trial and purchase, which was unprecedented compared to what we saw before. Google Trends, if you looked at that, it showed a 30% increase in online shopping searches, right? And similar to what we showed earlier with the latest stats from Bank Negara, we've seen, extremely large year-on-year growth in both value and the number of transactions are there. If we think about here to stay, it's possible that assuming that the foray into online shopping has been successful, that the new COVID cohort of e-commerce users may continue to spend in that way and continue to shift their shopping habits online, regardless of what happens next. It could be the behaviour we've become accustomed to. And lastly, for enjoyment, our feedback from shoppers suggests that online shopping, while it's convenient, really does not provide the same levels of enjoyment. There's a need to get it right online by ensuring that the websites are presenting, organising, informing consumers about the products that are on offer in a way that's a lot more relevant and engaging than the current. Potentially building in the best of the in-store experience onto the digital channel. And we'll share a little bit over the next few slides how some brands have embraced that or have dialed up the digital component to really deliver enjoyable experiences. So just a bit of a look at what's driving growth, specifically in Malaysia in comparison to Southeast Asia. And again, we're referring to our Ipsos Unleashed study here. And we basically asked people to explain why they're using online purchasing platforms beyond the fact that the stores were potentially closed. We see that price and promotions are very important, so that remains. That's always been there, okay? But what we've seen a bit of a new driver, I guess, in town, which is around the social distancing measures, right? That we don't have to deal with people within the store. And I think this is one behaviour which, again, won't be going away, all right? At least until we reach the end of the pandemic and whenever that may actually be. And just looking at the behaviour, right? A lot of the data we see on this chart shows us that omni-channel shopping behaviour is here to stay, okay? So even now, after several months, omni-channel is the most often used channel. And if we look at the figures on the right-hand side of the chart, those that either researched online and then bought in person, or those who both purchased online and researched online remain significantly high across the vast majority of channels. And again, we could like to reiterate, we can expect for those where it has been successful and it has been an enjoyable experience, that those shopping habits will continue to remain online. In regards to the enjoyment factor, a lot of our data has shown that the user experience of an app is something that really is a key determinant of future use, right? Of using that app again. And I think while a greater emphasis on digital and digital engagement is clear, an intuitive solution, if e-commerce is to take center stage in the new retail world, there is some work to do, right? It's often still rooted in transactional design. And I think it needs to evolve more to be experience-based and to be optimized for browsing and discovering brands and products. And some brands have embraced that from a start. And there's lots of examples, but I just wanted to show some that have been a bit closer to me over the last few months. And the first is probably one that we are all relatively familiar with, right? Shopee. I'm sure we've used that as well as other e-commerce players. But really from the start, I think there was an aim there to optimize the digital delivery, and there was three key components. One was around mobile first. So I think that was a big focus of Shopee from the start, okay? Secondly was around personalization, leveraging all the data they have and AI to really identify patterns and insights from users' behavior, both from a browsing and from a purchase point of view. And then lastly, making it social, right? And this is more towards the enjoyable aspect. There was really an aim from the beginning of the platform to integrate both the social aspect and the actual shopping experience. So there was various features like Shopee Live, a live streaming feature, Shopee Games, which is a bit of an interactive gamification aspect, and even Shopee Live Chat, right, where we connect the consumers with the end sellers as well. And I think another one would be around L'Oreal and Ipsos. Recently in our podcast series called Customer Perspectives, had some of the senior L'Oreal team there just talking about globally the push that they've seen on digital. Some of the highlight in a couple of seconds really around delivering a seamless yet authentic journey. Okay, both that online to offline blurring. The use of augmented reality, going beyond 2D, right? And I think that's some best practices there. And we're seeing a lot more of this now, and it really does drive engagement when it's delivered correctly. They also talked about personalization and making that as feasible as possible through the digital sphere. And lastly, there was a mention around virtual try-on in stores, right? This isn't completely new. It's been there for a few years, actually, but that has been revamped. It's now been offered across more products and more categories. So just a few good examples of brands who have really embraced the enjoyment factor to try and make the online experience as engaging as possible. These changing priorities, attitudes and behaviours do give brands an opportunity, however, to provide reassurance. And I think, that really it's around managing these uncertain times. And in doing so, I think it provides an opportunity to strengthen the customer relationship itself. And we can see we've got three key areas really focusing on staying close to your customers. The first is around, understand, and that's ascertaining, what are those influencing factors that impact customers and brands at the moment. For example, looking at online, it could be around redesigning the service for those who are not at ease with online shopping, right? Adding online support, feedback mechanisms, and hand-holding customers just to ensure that process is okay, as well as assuring customers on that transaction safety and the security that goes with that. Next is adapt. How can we refocus our offer? How can we really make that, meet the needs in the current time based on what matters? And I think importantly, it's around making that cost effective, right? And again, looking in the digital space, the surge in online shopping really requires brands to adapt accordingly and quickly, right? Operational efficiencies and new partnerships really matter. And I think at the moment, we're probably seeing large retailers partnering with new delivery companies, right, to expand that reach and also quickly adopting new payment technologies to meet some of the needs and the new behaviors that we're seeing. Last is anticipate. And it's really, how can we adapt and change and foresee what's coming and be agile enough to move towards that, right? I think that crisis can lead to long-term changes in the nature of brand and consumer interactions, as we've seen. And listening and responding to the needs puts brand on a much stronger footing to determine what that new customer experience looks like. So just looking at these in more detail, firstly, on understand, I think the speed of the current change in the customer-company interaction or relationship can seem very puzzling and at times often chaotic, right? However, if we systematically explore how those behaviours and needs are influenced, I think brands can fine-tune and model that offer to really meet customer needs. Again, if we think about your online shopping, I mentioned around that some customers will be at ease with this move, right? So that will really require a shift in the operation aspect, right? How can we better manage if we fall out of that online process? Or how can we make the online shopping experience more efficient? And if we think across to supermarkets, right, that's probably where we've seen a redeployment of staff, right? More there to stock the shelves and restock, or to even pick products for delivery companies, and many more delivery drivers being recruited through the various partners that they have. And again, on the other end of the scale, other customers may be less at ease with the online purchasing, right? So like I mentioned, this could be more use of online support, feedback mechanisms there to assist. And these must be there to help customers build new skills, right? To be able to put them at ease with online shopping. And that'll play quite a role internally around motivating that behaviour to ensure the online aspect stays and there's no revert back to bricks and mortar. And just high level, various areas to consider, right? One is around relationship strength. How do we maintain a healthy relationship with customers? What is that improvement, right? From a strategic perspective, what must we do? How can we do that? How can we be agile enough in our operations to improve quickly enough to meet the needs? Next is around tracking the pain points. What are those? How do we identify those? And how can we quickly test and learn successful new implementations, right? To learn around those and fix our processes. Closing the loop with customers is important, right? Across some of those key pain points. That's where we can recover bad customer experiences by interjecting with those, calling the customers back, communicating with them, and really recovering that relationship. And then various others here around, measuring those quick changes and the successes there, right through to quantifying the impact on the return on investment in the changes that we have made. Looking at adapt, we need to adapt to the new customer needs, like we mentioned. And really, for Ipsos' point of view, customer experience starts with people, right? Customers make decisions that affect the bottom line, and we need to understand why customers make those decisions and how to understand those. And there's really three key areas we look at, which starts with understanding customers' needs and the expectations there, as well as from an employee perspective. All right. So firstly is around meeting the expectations set by the brand promise, right? We need to still uphold those values and ensure we deliver on the promises we've made. The next is in understanding our employees. Too often they're forgotten, right? We need to reinforce those brand behaviours, and especially at the moment, health and safety is very important from a bricks and mortar perspective, as well from an end point of view, from a delivery chain from online. And lastly, the right ingredients to drive stronger relationships. And I'm going to talk a little bit more around those over the next couple of slides. So building on previous R&D that we conducted in 2018 across several regions, from around 9 different sectors globally across 10,000 consumer interviews, what we tried to identify and uncover was the building blocks of strong relationships, customer relationships, and how we can really build emotional connection with customers. And we did this as several clients came to us and asked, what else can we do, right? We've worked significantly on our processes to make them more efficient. We've used other lean processes. Competitors are doing the same. And these functional components now are very good. We answer our calls in the right time. Online uptime's good. Everything is working correctly. And that these functional aspects really meet the basic needs, right? But what we found was that the functional components alone are not enough to drive and strengthen really stronger customer relationships. So We need to work out how to design and deliver experiences that go beyond the purely functional, transactional aspect and create longer lasting positive memories. And you can see on the screen we were able to identify key dimensions, or let's call CX forces, which we found to be strong drivers of the emotional aspect and to create stronger, longer lasting relationships. And I'll just quickly touch on each of those. And I think they're particularly relevant during the COVID crisis, right? Where focusing on these will allow brands to refocus the experience, measurement, and also the management to really address what matters in this point in time. Firstly is around enjoyment. In a nutshell, it's to help make customers' lives easier so they feel a sense of freedom. They can go about their day-to-day and not have to worry about the various operational aspects. Next is belonging. This is very much helping customers feel at ease and show that they care about the greater good, right? And a lot of this at the moment is really health and safety related, right? For example, there's dedicated shopping times or delivery slots for more vulnerable customers, or even for medical staff or carers, right, as an example. And there are also the continuation of the social distancing in store and the crowd control that we see in place in some of the relevant areas. And within our mystery shopping programs that we do, we're seeing a lot more emphasis being placed on health and safety audit and compliance, right, where we're measuring to make sure that retailers are really delivering on that promise. Next is certainty, and this has become a priority, not just in terms of public health, etc., but also in terms of the ability for consumers to access products, right, and important services. And also to give clarity what is or what is not available. Out of stock, as an example, when shopping online. And many brands have recognised this as and contacted customers to offer reassurance about this, not just on what they're doing to keep staff and customers safe, but also plans to ensure that the key products and everyday items, etc., are available and will be in stock. Fair treatment, this is really around that customers feel there is a fair exchange in the relationship, And again, we have seen some retailers or individual sellers, etc., try to be opportunistic and take advantage of this. And I think we've seen various online retailers have taken steps to counter this, right? Example, marketplace vendors trying to sell high goods, high demand goods at extortionate prices, and that's something we've seen, online retailers really managing. Control, that's really about helping customers feel in control of their situation and putting them in the driving seat, right? And I think, to ensure, for example, that, online applications are working, that they can get through to the contact center when they need to. All of these have a major element ensuring they are in control, including the likes of retailers communicating around the basics of shop opening hours, for example, during lockdowns, right? Or even delivery companies showing the real-time delivery trackers so that customers feel in control and are there when that arrives. And last but not least is status. And this is, making customers feel valued or respected and potentially worthy of special treatment. It may not be for all of retail customers, right? It may be for the more loyal customers, the more high-value spend customers, where we want to show that preferential treatment. And I think during COVID, we've seen some good examples of that, especially with airlines who have, frozen some of those frequent flyer miles, as an example, where we are not able to fly. I just wanted to give you an example of the CX forces in action and the simple look at an online shopping journey. Okay, so here we can see the various stages a consumer will go through, from the initial search straight to the parcel. And I'll just give some examples of how where we may want to dial up or dial down the forces in the right way to reiterate those and create that stronger relationship. So first is around certainty within the product search phase. So to show that products are available and the times, the delivery times that will come with those. If you know that from a personalized shopper approach, if we log back into a site and the usual products we purchase are not available, it's to quickly recommend alternative products, potentially those that we have ordered before. From an ordering perspective, looking at enjoyment, right? Potentially giving free delivery as one. Payment, fair treatment, it may be that you don't need to make payment until the parcel has been delivered, could be an option. And lastly, on receiving the parcel, potentially a thank you note, right? Just to say we appreciate the business during these times. All of these are appreciated and will help to build stronger building blocks as we go through. The last bucket was anticipate. And that's really to try and anticipate what the future customer experience will look like. Again, the last recession really showed that those changes in a crisis can lead to long-term changes, right? And it's how the brands can adapt to the changes in the consumer brand interactions. And I think in addition to making these short-term adjustments to their offer, fundamentally, it helps to keep a relationship going if we listen longer term. Showing flexibility, meeting customers' needs in these challenging times will certainly have positive consequences on the emotional attachment. And I think that will also show in the consumer goodwill and the longer term loyalty that we have. Okay. The brands that are actively managing these changes now will probably end up being more prepared for the future, right? And that versus those that cannot adapt and support their customers. And the brands are clearly focusing on dealing with the current situation. Some have taken, drastic decisions, right, including, like I mentioned before, potentially reducing or reallocating headcount to keep their business afloat. Some may have even shut down parts of the business, right, or some of the channels. But I think the question really is now is how will they be prepared to deliver the right customer experience when the demand for services grows once we come out of this? So will they be ready to operate back to the levels of pre-crisis? Okay, just on the kind of summary now, and I guess based on the discussion we've had, right, around these new and the accelerating trends we're observing, we just want to set out a few key actions, both for online and also for bricks and mortar, as we face the challenge of adapting in that longer term, right, in the more fluid retail context and the evolving customer journey that we have talked about. But very much the core of this is the aim of bringing together a strong omni-channel offering. So firstly, just to look at digital, don't try and replicate all of the real world retail online, right? So although we live in current times where the division between our offline and offline can feel blurred, how we approach shopping in each channel has to be different. It's fundamentally different, right? We talked before around really creating that, the enjoyment and the engagement environment within digital. But that said, do digitalize the best bits, right? Again, around enjoyment, it helps to think what customers do enjoy in store and try to bring some of that online. Potentially improving, product descriptions or personalizing that content to directly deliver what we know shoppers are looking for. And there's various good examples of augmented reality and going beyond 2D that are already out there. Connecting to the wider web. So the beauty of engaging via digital channels is the ease of flipping from one site to the next, right? So we do have to try hard to keep customers onto our domain. So don't develop that online space in isolation, right? Bring in reviews from other third-party sites, for example, to make sure we keep consumers on our sites. End-to-end journey, all touch points, whether it's in-store, online, need to be viewed in the context of the end-to-end customer journey and in relation to one another. From a customer perspective, they are not viewed as separate. Right? So knowing where and why customers switch is very much critical, right? So retailers need to really understand and put measurements in place and interventions there to understand where the switch of channels happens. Crisis proof through the omni-channel offer. Again, so think about making the channel strategy crisis proof by developing that strong omni-channel offer. It pays to be flexible in these uncertain times, right? So we need to allow and also encouraging customers to engage via any channel, preferably of the choice that they have, all right? And that'll really help us to continue to do business no matter what happens or the next changing phase. And again, back to the core, really championing a hybrid approach, right? Digital is not always the best option and it can't always run on its own, right? As we've heard, as we've gone up, there's often fallout or there's different needs across these. So it can be a good idea when we support customers with more complex online tasks to add some positive friction, right? Potentially through pop-ups. But we know humans can't be replaced completely. Chatbots can only deal with some simple things, right? So be realistic, about what can and cannot be achieved. A hybrid approach can definitely ease pressure on some of these key tasks, and it can free up people to put the value elsewhere in the chain. And let's not forget bricks and mortar, right? It's still here and it will be here. Firstly, around hygiene, customer experience, okay? We need to consider what our hygiene factors are, right? People are basing purchase decisions on brand choice and how seriously locations are taking their cleaning, their health and safety, social distancing efforts, right, to create those safe spaces. So some of these hygiene factors are very much still a driver, as we saw earlier. Potentially to rethink store layouts, right? Traditionally, we're based on browsing, upselling, impulse purchase, etc. But we know shopper behaviour is changing. So I think we need to restore that layout, right? For example, grouping together related items, right? Which may mean actually within store, they're placed around multiple locations, but long as it meets the customer's needs there. And I think that will help to minimise the time in store by helping shoppers stay in that one-way system, right? Without the need for our favourite Malaysian U-turns. Repurpose the format. Make it easier for customers by repurposing the spaces, right? Convenience is a very important consideration, but it definitely looks different in today's world, right? So really responding and understanding why customers are entering your store in the first place could lead you to consider other aspects. For example, curbside formats, easier pickup, and I know that's easier said than done in some locations. Blended shopping, just browsing is a thing of the past. I think our retail visits are more purposeful during the pandemic. And bringing that benefits of online shopping to bricks and mortar is also something we can look at. It basically means that the stores can have the best of both worlds, right? And that may be help to enhance convenience, ensure more physical distance, but also retain some of that human element. Retail bubbles is also something that, of consideration. And I think here in Malaysia, we're lucky with the appreciation of the mall format, right? But it's definitely something that we should be looking at, and we're seeing that around the world where we have all under one roof. It really prevents the convenience, the need for the consumer to visit multiple locations also reduces. And lastly, essential experience. Really maintain that overall essence. Continuity and the elements that are really central to the brand will help to drive that familiarity, the advocacy, and probably also conversion, right? And, a couple of brand examples there. If you think of Levi's in the retail stores right around the world, they've really tried to reopen their fitting rooms as early as possible and keep offering those tailored services because it's a core part of their brand fit and feel around the product. Whereas other, some major retailer chains haven't really deemed that to be as essential, right? So it's really going back to what's core, what fits with the brand, and how we can continue to do that. Thank you very much for having us today. And, please reach out directly to myself or questions if you have them. Have a good rest of the day.